but we'll speak a little bit more. So I'll read it as we go. So this week, we finally finished a project that's been on our workbench for years. It's a cross. And this was before Easter. And so with Easter approaching, we put a big effort into completing it. And specifically, it's a crucifix with the ordinary Christ on one side, and on the other side, there's the risen Lord. So it's got the two figures. And obviously, this illustrates the love Jesus had for us on Good Friday when he died, and is overcoming death for all of us when he rose on Easter Sunday. The two sides are really important, and we made this cross for children's liturgy at our church. So, but then completing the project sparked a conversation between us about seeing two sides in life beyond just our own viewpoint.
We recently went out for a walk. We've been going out for walks, and we have a circuit that we do from our home, about 5 kilometres, and we usually go one way. And on one particular day, we decided we'd do it the other way around. And it was interesting to notice that actually we noticed different things, actually the same route, but a different direction. And so we pondered which direction to take. And in that walk, we realized that each was different. And so we often ponder which direction to take in life, recognizing that each way offers us a different perspective.
And so in relationships, understanding the other's perspective, and particularly our partner's perspective, is really very important indeed. And in our vows, we promise to love and cherish each other. And that starts with genuine listening and understanding. And we reflected that one of the really interesting learning points that we took from Brendan Thomas, who's in Catholic Voices, was about what's called reframing. And that's about emphasizing the importance of seeing life through different lenses, different windows or different frames, so reframe. And so when irritation arises, reframing helps us to remember a love for our partner and to try and view things from their perspective. And, I have to say that I find it easiest to overcome little bits of irritation. I only get irritated a little bit.
Me.
When I remember my love for Annette, seeing her amazing perspective initially in 1976 was what attracted me to her. So I think, actually, why wouldn't I try and see things from her perspective before letting my irritation with the little things she's doing take over? And plus, sticking to my own point of view and becoming grumpy, which never happens, wouldn't look good, because actually then I end up looking like a sourpuss. And Pope Francis' expression, sourpusses don't impress anybody at all, do they?
So as we enjoy the sunshine, the wind, the spring blossom, the warmer April, and we meet others, we said, let's radiate our joy. And it might inspire other people to ask about our perspective, our hope, and our joy. And
so
we were reflecting on that.
That was what we wrote, and it then occurred to us that actually we've touched on this several times before.
We found on the internet from somebody called Richard Chandler something about embracing the perspective of your wife, husband, or partner. And they said, learning to understand and appreciate your wife or husband's perspective is an essential skill. Your mutual happiness depends on seeing and feeling what life is like from their perspective. Couples that fail to empathetically embrace their partner's perspective, his or her way of seeing the world, remain unhappy. Real empathy comes from going, I understand how upset you are. It really hurts me that I'm messing this up and I've got to take some action. Real empathy comes from feeling your partner's pain in a real way and then doing something about it.
Yeah. So experiencing life from another's point of view isn't always easy to do. And we all default to our own perspective and way of seeing things and experiencing the world. But by experiencing the couple communication tips that he's put in, we'll begin more empathy. So actually, we're going to look at what can be done.
And in a book that we read many years ago, we saw something about conversation. And conversation is not just about conveying information or sharing emotions, nor just a way of putting ideas into people's heads. It's a meeting of minds with different memories and habits. And when minds meet, they don't just exchange facts, they transform them, reshape them, draw different implications from them, and engage in new trains of thought.
Yeah, that's from Theodore Zeldin, and it's probably about 15, 20 years since we came across that. And he talks about actually conversation just doesn't reshuffle the cards in how we see things. It actually creates new cards.
Yeah. And, that in our lives, the phone's ringing, the WhatsApp's going, all sorts of things. And life is too busy for real conversations. So it's a bit like, no, you haven't shared the picture.
No, we need to have some mechanisms, and in Marriage Encounter, in teams, we have different tools that we use to do this. So let me know this is it here. Seeing things from both sides. This from current slide. There we are. This is another bit that we thought was really good. Actively considering other people's point of view happens when you try your best to suspend your judgment and understand that person's thoughts, motives, and emotions, as well as why they think and feel the way they do.
And in this sense, perspective taking is an intentional process rather than something that's automatic. Because in life, we do not always get things right. We may assume that our partner's meaning one thing and actually they're meaning something else. And we don't always see their perspective. We see our own perspective. And in the heat of the moment, we might not see the other person's perspective at all. So
we quite like this image here, that man on a desert island, seeing somebody in a boat and go, "Hey, splendid!" But actually, there is another perspective as well.
Person in the boat sees land. Thanks, great. So they're seeing it from different ways.
Yeah. So
with that in mind,
we
had some questions, and
for a 10-10. There's a choice of questions as well. Here we are. To what extent do I really listen during our routine daily time, during our special couple time, and what could I do differently, and what tools could we use? Yeah, to really have that conversation and engage in the conversation.
To see things from the other's perspective. So do we listen or do we make judgments? And the second part, what do I think you would say about my listening and seeing from your perspective?
So
does that sound? Well, should we give we give the background, shall we? Paul is always talking about doing DIY.
Yes.
And
Annette really doesn't like dust.
Do not like dust. And it gets up my nose, literally, and it makes my chest tight. And I really cannot bear it. And we have talked about doing some DIY for a long time in our own house instead of other people's. And well, there comes a point when it has to be done.
Yes.
And so I have reflected on that in the 10-10 that we did. So do you want me to tell you about our 10-10?
Yeah, go on.
So I found it difficult to think of examples of Paul seeing and listening to my perspective, because my perspective is that he knows I don't like dust, and it physically makes my chest tight. I'm not sure, but his view is it's got to be done, so we just got to go on with it, which is quite difficult. And I like to sit down and plan how we can do it so it's minimum dust, so we cover things and we block things off. And recently Paul thought he'd just get started.
Yeah.
And I was in the kitchen, and that's where he's working, and there was nothing put up to cover anything. And I like to plan how we're going to do it and then get on with it. And he thought that was a waste of time. So
we've gone off script here, but carry on.
I've taken to organise to go for a walk with a friend, go to our daughters, go out for a walk on my own, as a way of coping and being out of the situation. So then I deal with what happens when I come back. And I wrote down, if I'm being honest, I try to avoid conflict. And so we go away. And now what I was reflecting on is that me embracing his perspective, that he thinks, well, it's got to be done. Mess is going to be made. So actually letting him do it, and because it's important that it gets done and it's important to him to do it, is that me actually understanding his perspective, and is it short-term pain or long-term gain? So that was my reflection. Mm-hmm. And actually I think that was helpful.
Yes, well, it certainly sparked a conversation and an emotional perspective as well, because I wrote, I don't know, you might say that I don't listen to you. I wonder if I've got feedback from you about this. Well, I certainly have just now. But we do have conversations about our thoughts, about family, about the world, about church, and sometimes about us. And generally we seem to be on the same page. But as Zeldin says, actually, being on the same page isn't quite enough. It's not about reshuffling the cards. Having real rapport is about remaking the cards, actually making sure that we are fully engaged. So how often do we listen to the extent that we remake the cards, I said? And we try to do it when we sit down monthly. And we try to listen to each other when we exchange daily, 3 things about today. And so actually, with this perspective, I thought, well, actually, we need to try this again. And we've already done a 10-10, but
we can do another one. We
can add to this. We can do a 10-20-20, and you can do a 10-10. So here's your choice of questions, because we think there's probably quite enough for 10 for each one, and you can take one home as well. To what extent do I really listen during our routine daily time, during our special couple time, and what could I do differently? What tools could we use? And the other option is, what do I think you would say about my listening and seeing from your perspective?
Which is what we wrote about, but we'll do the other ones now. Okay, is that all right? So 10-10?
So it's more or less 8-10. So we got till 8:30, and then we can
8:20.
share on what we think.
We'll tell you at 8:20.
Okay.